Welcome to We the World and our 2025 MLK Manifesting the Dream event. Each year, we take time to remember Martin Luther King Jr. and his beloved community. And each year, we are thrilled to feature the many people and organizations who have taken action to be of service, not only in January and February, but all year round. We at We the World welcome you to take action and be of service at we.net/MLK from January 15th to February 28th. Please join us in being a part of this annual celebration and consider being of service in your communities and with us. Of course, donations are very appreciated at we.net/donate. My name is Jana Larson, and I am the HR Deputy Director of We the World. Today we have a very special guest. We have Daniela Gioseffi. I hope I pronounced it correctly. And she is a person that I met with the Climate Reality Project, and I had her on as a guest. With our partner project we have with Malcolm Berman of malcolmpresents.com, and we have a weekly show called Malcolm and We, and she was a guest, and we had a fabulous time. So we decided to invite her back, and thank you so much for being here again. And we're going to have just a very fun conversation talking about her life, her career, everything that she's done, and it's quite fascinating. So let's start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. That's what Julie Andrews sang in Sound of Music, remember? And so I thought, let's start with you as a young girl. You're growing up in New Jersey in an Italian American neighborhood. And did you have siblings?
I have a younger sister and an older sister. We were three girls, and my father always wanted a son. But then he finally said, "You're as good as any son. You put my name in the Library of Congress." He was proud of all my books.
Oh, how wonderful. So it was a very supportive, happy family, I would guess. And you,
It's like all families sometimes
oh,
have
well, yeah.
closure.
And you mentioned that well, we're going to go through everything because you've done many things, but you mentioned that you were an activist at the age of 5.
Well, actually, I became an activist at the age of 20 when I was assaulted by the Ku Klux Klan for integrating Selma television 3 years before Martin Luther King marched with Lewis over the Edmund Pennant Bridge in Selma. So that was right after the first Freedom Ride. And I was assaulted and abused and taken to the jail at night because I was a pretty blonde girl, though now I'm old and brown and gray, but young and pretty, so they didn't assault me until the middle of the night. They came to my boarding house where I was staying because I was an intern journalist on WSLA-TV, Selma's first television station. And because I went on an all black gospel show announcing a freedom ride, they came for me in the night and took me to the jail and abused me. But you're correct, Yana, that my life as an activist, in a way, started when I was 5 years old. My older sister was supposed to walk me to kindergarten because she was in grammar school in a higher grade, and she was supposed to walk me to Avon Avenue School in Newark, where I lived on Hunterdon Street in those days. In those days, everything was ghettoized. There was an Italian ghetto, a Jewish ghetto, an Irish ghetto, a black ghetto, etc. So I'm walking to school, and my sister runs ahead with her friends, being a kid, also 6 years older, and I'm 5, and I got lost. And I
How
walked,
did you get lost? She was right up ahead of you.
she ran way ahead, and I
Oh,
sight of her, and I wandered into the black ghetto, which was
oh.
the Italian and the Jewish ghetto in Newark. And I was walking along, looking a little bit like Shirley Temple with my baloney curls and my Mary Jane shoes, even though I was coming from an upwardly mobile, very immigrant, not rich at all, poor Italian American, Jewish, Polish, German. I mean, we're a mixture of many things, even though my Greek, Albanian, Italian father came from Italy. But I was walking through this black ghetto, looking a little bit like Shirley Temple. And all of a sudden, I started noticing old black men sitting on broken down porches with broken windows and ripped uh, shades on the windows, and nobody ever bothered me or hurt me. And I was scared because I was lost, but I'm looking around and I'm seeing all this, what you could characterize as unhappy poverty. And I finally found my way to school, but somehow that never left my memory, how sad those people looked. And somehow I think we're born being anti-racist or being empathetic toward other humans. I think that's part of the human nature if it doesn't get destroyed by the wrong kind of racist education. And so I kept that in my heart. And then later in life, as I told you, I was abused by the Klan for integrating the first Selma television station 3 years before King marched. And after that terrible, which was actually sexual abuse in the jail at night by the Ku Klux Klan, who was an assistant deputy sheriff of Montgomery County. He said he warned me that they would kill me, and I hightailed it home, but I became an activist for the rest of my life. And that has driven me through human rights, voting rights, which I was working for then, climate crisis. And I've been doing a lot of interviews and talks during the pandemic via Zoom at public libraries all over New Jersey and New York. And so I was given the climate leadership diploma by Al Gore in 2022. And now I emphasize that because the climate issue is one that affects all humanity of every color, because we're all earthlings and we have very little time to save our beautiful, plush, habitable earth, which is already giving us all the signals with extreme, horrible weather and tornadoes and floods and wildfires.
Yes. And that's something that we're going to talk about more a little later. But going back to your youth and your childhood and your young days, going to school and that time period, besides the experience that you had with this unfortunate experience, what else was going on in the world that you recall as being significant and noteworthy? You know, those little stories that you have about it that aren't ones that make it to the news or that a lot of people would understand amidst this current day, during this event, very ironically, not anything at all part of Martin Luther King's dream, what we're seeing. And how does it compare?
Well, I think actually all human rights of all earthlings matches Martin Luther King's dream of social justice that we all long for. And I remember as a young woman in graduate school, the shooting of JFK. And then I remember as a young woman, after I had my only child, my precious daughter, and I remember the massacre of Martin Luther King. And then I remember Bobby Kennedy shortly after that, because he stood up for human rights, even though that nobody's perfect, and his family certainly wasn't perfect. But and some say Martin Luther King himself wasn't perfect. I don't think any of us can be perfect, but the major part of the lives of these people were for justice and human rights. And I certainly don't pretend to be perfect myself, but there was so much that I saw in my youth, the assassination of Martin Luther King, which was such a sad day. And then the riots in Newark, which burned down my old neighborhood. I those riots. I've lived through more recently the murder of George in front of all of us on camera, and the Black Lives movement, which was, and I just know that the young people are putting all of these issues together because the right to clean air and water is a human right. And voting rights have a lot to do with whether we get clean air and clean water. So, in a way, there's no escaping sociopolitics in our time or any time, because if
Right.
you're silent about sociopolitics, the wrong people get elected, and then bad things happen for all of us. Our Clean Air Act, our EPA, our Environmental Protection Agency, our America, USA being part of the Paris Accord, all of those things are being undone in our time. And every nonprofit has the right to put its wealth and ability behind issues that are important to human rights, regardless of politics. And there are people from both sides of the political spectrum in the USA who are with us on climate crisis. Didn't I read, and aren't I correct, that there's about 85% of people in the USA concerned about climate because they're living through the floods and the extreme weather and the wildfires. We even had them in New York and New Jersey lately. So
Mhm.
wildfires and droughts and floods and tornadoes, they're happening everywhere. And we're all earthlings. And we all have lived more by love than by war. It's love. And I don't mean it in a sappy way. I don't mean it in a just the love between men and women. But I'm talking about the love of our fellow humans. We only survive with that energy of empathy, compassion, and love. And that has to go to our environment, which many profiteers are destroying right before our very eyes. And we have to remember that The Inconvenient Truth was a documentary made way back in 2006. And here we are beginning 2025 with the USA bowing out of the climate accords, uh, leaving the Paris Agreement, and now even the money that was donated by the IRA for climate crisis issues, it could be taken away by this new horrible Project 2025, which could kill the earth and all life on earth, because some of the oligarchs now controlling our politics, they want to fly off to barren Mars instead of saving beautiful plush earth. And we only have
It's
6 years to do that, according to climatologists.
right. The doomsday clock is very close to doom, and it's hard to not pay attention to that, and to just live life, and and try to do good. But as you say, I think that there are a lot of people that, while they may not have quite understood that this election wasn't just about the price of eggs, it was about so much more than that. And well, for all of us, those of us like you, like We the World, people that are partners and people that work with us and support us, it's pretty scary. So, you were also an actress, and when was that? Was that before the experience with the Ku Klux Klan? Was it after? Was it at the same time? I mean, you've just done so many things. I just wonder, how did this all fit into this big puzzle of your life?
I have been a jackass of all trades, it's true. I was an actress and I toured with the National Players. And
Yes.
after graduate school, after the assassination of J.F. Kennedy and the great Martin Luther King. But he said that he had been to the mountaintop and that was what mattered to him most. And certainly he's still an inspiration for us. And how many know he got his inspiration from Tolstoy? Tolstoy was the first one to write about nonviolent action. And right now we have to be so careful about nonviolent action because we
Hmm.
the Reichstag to be burnt down the way it was by the Nazis in Germany, which helped Hitler come to power by claiming that it was the uh, people of Jewish extraction who had burned down the Reichstag. So we have to be very careful that our movement is nonviolent. and broadcast the fact that we are following in the steps of Tolstoy and Martin Luther King when it comes to nonviolence, because King knew that if he started a violent movement, that people who cared about human rights would be shot down in the streets. So he
Mm-hmm.
had to be nonviolent. And our climate movement is totally nonviolent. And Al Gore has done a great deal for that, but he himself has been maligned, and our movement for the climate has been maligned by profiteers of the fossil fuel industry. And now even microplastics,
Mm-hmm.
population explosion are all threatening our dear Mother Earth. So I think of myself as a guardian of Earth. And I always tell people earthly blessings because
I noticed that.
it's universal and it's non-gender and it's universal. And as a grandmother, I have been particularly concerned, of course, with my children and my daughter and my grandsons, but all the young people who are very depressed about the fact they might not have a future on this planet. So, number one for me is fighting for climate justice. And we have to be so careful of greenwashing because there are people out there who pretend to care about the environment while they're really selling horrible products. And how many people realize that plastic is made from petroleum, from fossil fuels? And how many people stop to think that fossil fuels are dug up from the bowels of the earth? They are the old, dead, rotting life down there, way down in the earth, that we're digging up, and uh, we're spraying it through, smoking it into our atmosphere by burning these dirty fuels that come from the bowels of the earth. And we're killing our clean air and water and the very thin veil of our atmosphere, which is our very breath. Our very breath, our exhalation is what we're speaking. These words we're speaking come from the atmosphere. They come from the fact that we breathe in, and when we breathe out, we are giving out the air that we breathed in after it's been used, and we are part of the whole system of ecosystem of nature. So our very breath comes from the atmosphere that we're destroying with tons of dirty fossil fuel burning. And Mother Nature really needs our help now because she's having a very hard time with all this extreme weather. And it affects everyone everywhere. And the USA, being the has produced more carbon in the atmosphere than any other developed nation, though others have joined in, like China and India. And India is very angry with the USA because we put more carbon up there, and now we're telling them not to. So it's complicated, but China is actually producing more green energy than the United States, even though they're still big polluters. So it's a complicated issue, and yet it's a very simple issue. We have to go to clean, real, renewable energy from solar, wind, and geothermal as soon as possible, and hopefully before 6 years are up, because we have to keep the climate at 1.2 Celsius or 3 degrees Fahrenheit, or where all life everywhere, of every color, of every race, of every nationality, of every religion is at stake now. We are earthlings together.
That's right. And I grew up in I grew up in Colorado. So I grew up in a family that was very in Boulder. I mean, we were very eco conscious back then. That was our lifestyle. We took public transportation or we rode our bikes. Even my dad would ride his bicycle to work. We lived close enough that he could ride his bicycle home to have lunch with the family and then ride it back. And so that was just the way we were. And I when I left my childhood home and moved around, I saw that many places were not like that. But I maintained that thinking and raised my kids to be that way too. So you were aware early, I was aware early, and then we get to the real world and we see how things are. When I was in high school, that was when the Vietnam War was coming into our living rooms, and the people, guys that were older than me, were going into the service, and it was just a really scary time thinking about what was happening in the world. And I was very, I met my husband to be, we were very funky. We were living in the mountains. We were living in a teepee. And, but I wasn't being as organized as you and doing the, being aware in my activism as you were writing. You wrote a book, or you edited a book that apparently is on prejudice, and that was in the 2000s that you wrote that. But can you talk about that book, because you were probably talking about a lot of things, like, I mean, how about environmental racism? Were you talking about that?
Actually, that book contains an essay which Al Gore gave me the permission to reprint, uh,
Oh.
Earth and the Balance, about environmental racism. So my feelings about against racism and my feelings about saving the climate and Mother Earth came together in that
Mhm.
Prejudice, which was given rave reviews, and it came out from a big press, Anchor Doubleday, and it was presented at the 777 United Nations Plaza, where my book Women on War was also presented, which won an American Book Award years earlier, and then was reprinted by the feminist press, because it too has a lot about the environment and how we have to stop the burning of fossil fuels. And there are many lawsuits against ExxonMobil and these other fossil fuel companies, which do a lot of greenwashing, which is a kind of false commitment to
Yeah.
climate that we
They
have.
make it sound like they're doing good stuff, but they're really not.
They're not. It's true. But I have to go back to your question. Um, I just somehow I just felt that the only way I could survive after the horrible thing that happened to me when I was 20 and a virgin, and I was abused by the Ku Klux Klan in a jail cell because I had announced a freedom ride on WSLA-TV in Selma. I was so traumatized.
Of
The
course.
survive was by becoming an activist. And I'm not
Mm.
the only one who's done that. We know that mothers and fathers who have been hurt by their losing their sons and daughters to uh, gun violence join the movement for gun safety because it's
Mhm.
a way of survival. And that's what I did. I joined being an activist for all human rights, for women's rights, for environmental rights, uh, for all people. And right now, the women's rights are important to climate justice because the population bomb, as we call it, is also threatening Mother Earth. So
Mhm.
to think about all these issues as one issue for all Earthlings. And I forget what your exact question was, but I hope I've answered it.
I kind of have too. But I want to ask you a question, and I hope it's not too personal. This experience that you had in this jail, were you able to get any kind of justice for that?
Oh no, I was scared to death. And my father was in his 60s or late 50s with heart trouble. And
Oh.
he was an Italian patriarch, even though he was Greek Albanian Italian with a mixture behind him. But he would say, you can have a date when you're 28 with a chaperone. And because I grew up in a time when women had no rights to what happens to their own body. Abortion was still outlawed. People were dying from illegal abortions. After all, Yana, when we think about it, my I birth control was only legal 3 years before I was born, and here I sit.
Mm.
And women, our mothers, only got the right to vote in our lifetime.
I
So
know.
women to do anything is very young, and now it's being taken away in all the red states. And it's a shame because there's a threat not to give uh, any help to California after the wildfires. But the fact is, California pays way more taxes So does New York and New Jersey, all the blue states where there are big metropolises or metropoli give far more money in taxes to the US government than some of the red states. So this is a terrible inequality that that California or New York would be threatened without help from FEMA.
How can that be with all that we know? With all that we know and all we've been through, how can that possibly be? I just absolutely can't understand.
I have a lot of evidence that the last presidential election was stolen. And there's a whole documentary about it called Vigilantes Incorporated, about how not just Black, but Latinx and Asian votes were repressed, challenged, or stolen in the swing states. And there's no mandate for the current administration that's against saving the earth and against the Paris Accord and against the money that's already been passed by the Congress for climate justice. There's already a terrible, terrible situation upon us right now. And there's no question that there are people who are fighting the truth and that there's terrible disinformation. They're using AI for disinformation. This is a very complex time. But I note that the state of New Jersey has passed a law that all of its public schools and public colleges and universities must teach climate science, and that they must also teach how to discern disinformation from the truth. So some blue states are already passing laws to fight AI and disinformation and for climate salvation, to put it that way. But I'm thinking now your question was about how you grew up in Colorado, which had some of the first all green communities, as New York State, Ithaca, for example, was an all green city where all green energy was instituted. So we have to remember, and what I try to tell my grandsons and my children when they get all upset, and the young people when they get all upset, I try to say, remember, there are millions of good earthlings who care about this issue all over the world, in every country, and we must join with them and find those people and join with them, because it'll make you feel better about fighting for climate salvation and climate justice and for saving Mother Earth. There is no planet B. Mars is a barren place, and those oligarchs who want to go there will be lucky if they ever get there.
I say they can just go there now.
They threatened to make Mother Earth a garbage can, and they
Yeah.
only to start a colony for 1 million people on Mars. And I can guarantee those 1 million people will be white supremacist males and their submissive wives and children. They will not be for the working classes of the world. That colony on Mars is meant for only 1 million people, and they're going to make a garbage can out of our beautiful, glorious, tree-lined, ocean-lined, beautiful planet Earth. There is really no planet B.
You're right on that. So you do have conversation with your daughter and your grandson. How old is your grandson?
They're now 19 and 17, and they've been
You
very
have two. Oh, okay.
climate. Their schools have done a good job too. As a matter of fact, it was a year ago, April, that I gave a talk in the local high school. And I was so trepidatious because here I was already 82 years old, and I'm thinking, these young people aren't going to want to listen to this old lady. And I went with more trepidation than I ever do for an adult audience. The local high school where I live, I won't mention exactly where. And
Right.
I went in there in the auditorium, and all these young people filed in, and I said some of my poems about
Mhm.
climate. And in between, I laced all the issues of salvation of the climate or climate justice or saving the climate before it's too late. And I thought, oh my gosh, I hope. And they were applauding me and they were high fiving me on the way out. They really, this idea that you keep it a secret from your children is not good. Robert Litt wrote a whole book about how psychic numbing and the fear of talking to children about how you can save
They
yourself.
already know. They feel it. Yeah.
They want us to care and they want us to talk about it in a positive way. What can we do to save the climate? What can we do to stop war? What can we do to stop genocide? They want to join with the other people who care. We want to keep them positive and not scared, but we also want to educate them about the truth.
Yes. So you started echopoetry.org. And did you do that after being with Climate Reality Corps, before, during?
I
Um,
did that before I was educated as a climate leadership speaker by the
okay.
Climate Reality Project. I
Uh-huh.
way back and oh gosh, was it? It was I think it was about 2023 or four, and then I saw The Inconvenient Truth, and that really inspired me because it was a documentary of scientific. And whatever you think about Al Gore, he's telling climate truth with 100 climate scientists from all over the world who won the Nobel Prize with him. He's not doing this alone. He's got climatologists all over the world. And Michael Mann warns us that we have to stop talking doomsday only. We have to inspire what can be. So I've been involved with ecopoetry.org for many years now. And all the work on there is contributed free by world-class poets from all over the world and mainly the United States, but poets from everywhere who care about. And I was on there I met Bill McKibben in New York, and he's
Mm-hmm.
anyone can save us, the poets can, which inspired me. And I made that a little saying or a motto for ecopoetry.org because I also have editorials there that link to all kinds of climate uh, and environmental nonprofit groups. And also, I then became involved later with the Climate Reality Project and got my certification. And as I said, even during the pandemic, I was speaking at public libraries via Zoom. And I
Mm-hmm.
coupled up with a person who was a scientist, a PhD in environmental scientist, Dr. Marion Glenn, who had founded the environmental department of her college. And we would go around together, and I would give the inspirational talk, and she would outline the science and give a, a, a talk that was backed by science with her videos and everything. So I really got involved in the climate justice movement, but I am just as concerned with the right of voting acts and Martin Luther King's dream because it's all connected, it's all one. Human justice, earthlings, we're all one. And prejudice and war hurts everyone. As a matter of fact, the current wars in the Ukraine and in the Gaza Strip and Israel are polluting the atmosphere. They're doing more pollution to our thin veil of atmosphere, which is our very breath upon with which we speak, because as we exhale our breath, our articulators shape it into words that our mind immediately understands. And the miracle of human life, the miracle of the intricacy of ecosystems, it's something to bow down and pray to survive. I mean, to keep going, because this earth is such a delicate ecosystem. It's such a wonder that nobody's one culture or one religion is correct. All the great religions of the world have the same golden rule that all we earthlings can embrace to save our own atmosphere, our own climate, and that is do unto others as you would have them do unto
One, you, the golden rule.
every
Yeah.
religion of the world, every Muslims, Christians, everybody. So to make wars over religious beliefs is insane. And we need to and right now we have a big fight with the Project 2025 against our plan to try to be at least 85% or 100% fossil free by 2030. It's going against the international, the UNIPCC. It's going against everyone decent on the earth who cares about preserving Mother Earth. And we're all united with that purpose if we could only understand that and fight the profiteers who care more about
Yes.
pocketbooks than human life.
What's the youngest group of people that you've worked with, maybe with poetry or something like that, when you're talking about human rights, being earthlings? Do you have you worked with all groups? You said that the high school kids were giving you high fives and
When
go
I
ahead.
was a woman, I worked with poets in the schools of New York State, and I would go around to all the public schools everywhere and get the kids writing their own poems and making up their own mythological creatures. So their imaginations and get them writing and drawing was really all part of the justice movement in a way, because it encouraged individual inspirational creativity, which is what we need in these movements, because we're not fascistic in our style in these nonprofit movements that try to bring people together. We're
Mhm.
accepting of people of every color and every background and every sexual persuasion. And we are trying to bring people together to save the earth. So, first, I worked with very young people as a teacher of creative writing, as a professional writer. And I've written
Mhm.
books on social justice, six of them poetry. I did On Prejudice, A Global Perspective. I did Women on War and Survival in the Nuclear Age. And all of my writing has been on social justice issues. But bringing out human creativity is always a part of it, because I remember in the anti-Vietnam years, it was uh, the singer-songwriters like Pete Seeger and Joan,
Mhm.
exciting us to care about anti-war movements. And I don't think there's anyone who really thinks that war is good for the human race, no matter what their belief. I think everybody would agree that murdering innocent civilians for profit, which is what wars are always about, they're about stealing and profiteering and sending young people who don't profit from the war out to die for the rich. So it's always a problem to keep oligarchy, and nobody has had a perfect democracy, and the US experiment in democracy has never been perfect. The rich have always controlled more than the working classes in many cases. But Martin Luther King taught us nonviolent action, and he made a big difference. And we're more aware. And we have to remember that we now have a Black woman on the Supreme Court. We have we had Black people who were great in our military. uh, there's no difference between any, there are good and bad people of every kind, and my belief is mostly good. Most people are just struggling to feed their families, find a little love on this earth, have a roof over their head. And it's a shame that a few evil profiteers who are misguided want to destroy the rest of us. There's this colony that these oligarchs want to found on Mars. It's not for people of every color. It's not for women of independent mind. It's not for women who control their own bodies. And there's a great writer of Canada, Margaret Atwood, who wrote The Handmaid's Tale,
Yeah.
becoming true, not just here, but fascism is trying to take over the whole world. And that fact
Mhm.
not save the planet, because it's greatly based on the riches of the fossil fuel industrialists.
Yeah.
Billionaires who are helping. So you can't generalize even about billionaires. We have some billionaires on our side who are fighting with us for climate justice, and
Mhm.
know who they are. And we know who the one, not so good oligarchs and the good oligarchs are.
Yes. Well, and so you've worked with all ages. I used to be a preschool teacher, and I worked at a center, and it was, it was expensive. My thinking used to be, it's. I mean, I was lucky. I was raised at home with my mom being at home, and I did that as long as I could with my own kids till they got older. But so where I worked, the idea was I thought, well, this is good because they're learning socialization skills, you know, that they may not learn at home as well. And so by the time they get to kindergarten, they do know how to stand in line. They do know a little bit more about sharing and playing well with other children and lots of other things. But in my class, I didn't. When it was art and crafts time, I had everybody bring in their trash, you know, their paper towel tubes, anything like that that I could use. And so for the whole time, we made stuff with stuff, you know, repurposing, and I still do that today. But my point with that was that, you know, when you start early with kids, um, they go home and you know, I mean, I didn't have to tell my parents, hey, we have to do this, we were already doing it. But for a lot of kids, you know, they may not know that, and so the parents have pressure from the kids saying, guess what we did, you know. And so then they can start saying, well, mommy, daddy, we have to do this. Miss so and so said that we need to do this, we need to do that, or we need to care about everything. And so I mean, that's one way, but not everybody grows up that way. And then there's just this overwhelming negativity that is hard to fight against. And I don't know, it's tough out there. And how do you personally stay motivated?
Well, I'm not saying I don't have my days of depression. And sometimes
Yes.
we all need to take a break from caring so much to refurbish our own spirits. And I think that even the most progressive people who care about the climate or social justice would tell you that you need to take breaks. You need to keep remembering there should be joy in being alive, because we're
Mhm.
only here for a short while and it goes by fast. And the older you get, the faster it seems to go.
It sure does.
What Mark Twain said, because he was our great humorist here in the United States. And he said, I'm not afraid of dying. I was dead for thousands of years before I was born, and it never caused me the slightest inconvenience. Number one, not be afraid of dying. And number two, use the precious time on earth that you have to do the most good you can, because it makes you feel good. Actually, we humans are scientifically programmed in our brains to feel pleasure from helping other people. And we
I
get
do.
flooded with those good endorphins when we do something kind. But that
Mhm.
should have to sacrifice our whole lives and families for a good cause, because it's keeping a balance between the cause you care about, teaming up with the people who care about the cause with you, realizing you're not alone in the movement to save habitable earth and bring human rights and human justice to the planet. It's remembering that you're not alone and teaming up with the other people, and also remembering that your cause is nonviolent and broadcasting that it's nonviolent. And it's really a shame that some very violent criminals have been released into our streets now.
Mm.
That may be scaring people from nonviolent, peaceful protest. And that's something we have to deal with as well. But there are many ways to be active, even when you're
Mhm.
be active with your phone and on the computer, at inspiring other people. Uh, Even if we all recycle properly, which we should do, um, it's really the government and those tanks and bombers that guzzle oil and fossil fuels. And even the US Navy knows that, because they've already been researching how they can run their ships on solar and other kinds of energy. So the military, even in the US, is not totally blind to the fact that climate crisis is an issue they have to pay attention to, and they're working to run more of their machinery on real green energy. So we have to be so careful of this pretense at greenwashing. And there are many lawsuits, even by young people, suing for the right to a life on earth, to clean water and clean air. And some of those lawsuits are really coming before some of our justices who still stand up for truth. So we can't become discouraged, because the whole trick of these profiteers and these evil oligarchs who try to control things is to scare us, discourage us, exhaust us. So sometimes we need a break. And you were
Mhm.
Colorado, which was more of a green blue state, and
Mhm.
places like that in the blue states, and also in the red states, there are many people who care. So
Oh
this is
yeah.
a political issue. This is a issue of human survival on Mother Earth, and we have to remember it that way and not let the evil politics get in our way, because the way Hitler and Stalin won was by people being afraid to speak out. Even though Germany hated Hitler and his policies, they didn't speak out enough because they allowed themselves to be exhausted and repressed and silenced. So there are always the brave people who are out ahead, uh, like the geese who fly first in the V. There was
Mhm.
Martin King who
But
put,
they take turns with that. So
Martin Luther King who put himself out in front of the
Mhm.
movement and who risked his life for us. And that's why he deserves to be remembered. And
Yes.
so Bobby Kennedy was doing that when he was shot. And
Mhm.
John F. Kennedy was doing that when he stopped the terrible moment in the Bay of Pigs.
Mhm.
Some say it was the nuclear industrialists and the profiteers of fossil fuels who had him done in. We might never know the truth on some of these assassinations, but we do know that there are good people who have put themselves out in front. And we do know that there are millions of us who care about these issues to save our planet for all life, and we're all earthlings.
And we're all capable of doing even the simplest and smallest of actions. It just starts with one. Margaret Mead said that. And I was going to say something else. What you would know. Who was it that said youth is wasted on the young? Was that Mark Twain?
No, I think it might have been Wordsworth or somebody even earlier, because that's
Oh, okay.
might even have been Shakespeare. I don't
I
really
was just saying, Shakespeare had so many quotes, it could have been him.
uses of adversity, which
Hmm.
showed ugly and venomous, wears yet a precious jewel in his crown. And right now we're going through a time of great adversity, but also inspiring. The good people
Yes.
join the nonviolent movement to salvage our glorious plush Mother Earth. Because who wants to live on barren Mars anyway? Just a bunch of white supremacist oligarchs who are fools. And you know, the bad thing is, they had very bad, cruel, unempathetic, racist fathers. That's where they got it. That
That does seem to be a trend.
I feel pity for some of the oligarchs who are doing evil to Mother Earth and to the rest of us, because they were raised by hideous fathers who. So the good parenting is also a way of keeping people wanting to be alive and wanting to save Mother Earth, because it's the people who felt love who want to give love to both all the earthlings and Mother Earth. It's the people who feel love and who feel accepted, who are not racist. Actually, I know from my book on prejudice that hatred of the exotic other is a projection of self hatred. So if you
Mm.
really accept and love yourself enough, you just have to like yourself well. You don't have to be madly in love with yourself, but you can like yourself well enough to want to like and love other people. And it's the people who haven't been raised with love who are the evil ones who are spreading the lies. And I don't understand why Fox News hasn't been sued by a whole bunch of other people who've been lied about there in a great big class action suit. They lie about the climate, they lie about the people who are working to save it, they lie about the people who are working for human rights and human justice and women's rights, which are part of human rights. The ERA was actually, the Equal Rights Amendment was actually passed by 38 states. And it was said to be part of the Constitution by the last person who was the American president. And so there are a lot of good people who care about doing the what's loving. And those are the ones who have enough acceptance of themselves to want to give love to others. And so caring about yourself, keeping your health keeping yourself well, staying mentally balanced, staying away from evil drugs. And all of these things are part of the earth justice, salvation of earth, the climate justice movement. We have to even be careful of the word justice because it's used wrong by the other side. So
Yeah.
language can also be a
Yeah. Yeah. So we earthlings who are kind and nice and care have to find the other earthlings who are kind and nice and care. And that's, well, that's the whole idea behind We the World is our founder, Rick Ulfick, saw that there are a whole lot of great organizations out there doing really great work. Let's come together and collaborate and help each other and be a tsunami of nice, caring, good people. So um
contacting your government representatives at every level, from the local, state to the federal, who are with you, to tell them that you appreciate them. And it also
mhm,
contacting the ones who are against saving the earth, who have been fooled by the fossil fuel barons. We have to also contact them, no matter what state we live in. We have to let them know that we're watching what they're doing because they care very much about keeping their jobs. Because the people in government are very well paid, they have
mhm,
perks, they have a kind of health insurance that we don't all have. They keep their salaries for life as their pensions. They have a lot of motives for keeping their job and for not always telling the truth. So we have to thank the ones who are trying to help save Mother Earth for all, the ones who believe in what you and I have been saying here today. And that's why I love the whole name of your organization. We is a wonderful way of putting it. But at the same time, we have to let the ones who don't appreciate Mother Earth and who are fooled by the fossil fuel industrious, we have to let them know that we are not with their policies, and we have to be nonviolent and maybe being, I don't know, we live in a country that's not so much passionate. It's much more has the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant mystique of standing back and shaking hands instead of kissing on both cheeks and hugging the way you do in Latin.
that's right.
We have to be careful that we don't sound like crazy people when
Yeah.
we're the people who are doing the wrong thing for themselves. We have to remind them that they're hurting themselves and their children when they're all for fossil fuels and false greenwashing instead of really caring about true renewable energy. And there are so many breakthroughs being made. There's a way to
Mhm.
make batteries now with iron instead of you know
Lithium.
lithium batteries. There are all kinds of things coming forward. And AI is changing the world. Artificial intelligence is changing the world too fast. And nobody knows for sure whether it will save us or destroy us. So we have to get on the good side of artificial intelligence, learn how to discern disinformation, learn how to watch out for evil greenwashing, and look for what's really true and good. And it's possible to do. And there are many organizations out there doing it, including international ones, including
Mhm.
the international organization at the UN that were the I. You can say it for me. I'm talking so fast I can't get the right initials,
With
but
the sustainable goals.
yeah.
S
But I mean the UN organization, the UNIPCC, where
oh,
Al won the Nobel Prize, not for himself alone, but for 100 climate scientists working all over the world to save our blessed, plush, beautiful, nurturing environment, our clean air, our clean water, our organic vegetables. And the more you buy organic vegetables, the cheaper they become because
mhm,
they really do make a difference. Food around the world has now become full of toxins, and
mhm,
microplastics everywhere are now in our blood. So we have to remember that microplastics and plastics and polymers come from fossil fuels. So there are so many fronts that are all combined in which we are all working and struggling. And I don't use the word fighting so much as
Right.
for the good, working for the good is
Mm-hmm.
fighting, because what we're really doing is working and struggling forward for the good of all humanity when we talk about the need for saving Mother Earth and the climate, which has to do with saving the thin veil of atmosphere that we all breathe.
We need to make good trouble, as John Lewis said. Yes. Well, you know what? I think that that's a good place for us to end our interview, and it's been so delightful to speak with you again. I'm going to want you to come back to Malcolm and We, because you have so much to say, and you're fun to talk with. Do
I
you
love it. It's
go ahead?
wonderful. So happy to meet you. It just makes me feel good that there are others like you, Yana, who are working to save
Well,
Mother.
there are a lot of us,
Yes,
and we just have to find each other. How's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
they can write to me at authorandactivist@gmail.com. All one
Author, author, and activist.
and AND, activist, author and activist @gmail.com. And you can get to me that way. And I'd be happy to answer any questions as best I can. And I always love talking about saving Mother Earth for all of us Earthlings together in our struggle.
We're
Thank
lucky. We're lucky to have you on the planet with us at this time.
you,
Thank you.
all the great climate justice activists who care about lovingly saving the planet for all, and the thin veil of atmosphere so threatened by war and by pollution from the fossil fuel industries.
Wonderful. We must close. So first I must say thank you to Brigitte Ben Ali, our events director and my tech assistant for today. And thank you, Daniela. Did I say it right?
Yes,
for
thank
being for being here today. Thank you for audience for joining our broadcast today. Remember, please join us and take action to be of service at we.net/MLK, and donations are gratefully appreciated at we.net/donate. Goodbye from all of us at We the World.